There's been like plenty of chatter about a follow-up Nintendo Switch, and it's kind of clear that this console is now entering its kind of like twilight era. But it's also clear that this hybrid ain't done just yet. Okay, so yeah, after like 6 hugely successful years, and off the back of like the release of the Game of the Year contender Tears of the Kingdom, Nintendo's much loved and record-breaking hardware is now kind of ebbing ever closer to wrapping up its role as the company's kind of like primary hardware. However, if you look hard enough, there are kind of like subtle indications that Nintendo's first kind of handheld meets home console combo is likely now entering its closing years.
It could become the best-selling video game in history. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom released this Friday to rapturous critical acclaim and queues outside video game shops.
Critics are calling its release one of the most important pop culture events of the year.
The shipment of game and consoles were somewhat below the expectations.
There are warning signs at the Japanese company's core business.
It is not expecting to sell as much this year.
This would mark a third consecutive year of decline for the console.
The pace of sales for the Nintendo Switch is not as bullish.
It's worth remembering that when the console launched back in 2017, which feels like an eternity ago now, the console kind of represented this kind of fresh, bold, innovative and encouraging shake-up for the company. Coming off the back of the slow and rather dispiriting Wii U era, the Switch launched with an energetic push. Here was a company looking to put all of its collective eggs into kind of one hardware basket. The then novel hybrid concept had plenty of widespread appeal. I mean, being able to play a mainline, full-on, proper Zelda game on the toilet, sold. Anyway, we all kind of know what's happened since that kind of March 2017 debut. The Nintendo Switch has gone on to sell over 120 million units, and in doing so kind of legitimizing the kind of handheld form factor, the unique handheld form factor that it introduced. Oh, and it has also sold over 1 billion in combined software sales. That's with a B. A lot of those sales come thanks to landmark Nintendo series that have graced the console. We've had franchise-defining hits from like Super Mario Odyssey, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and game of the pandemic, Animal Crossing New Horizons. I mean, heck, even like launched a stinker 1-2 Switch has sold nearly 4 million copies. And yes, I'm still salty about paying nearly $60 for that thing. So despite all of the success, there has been like a notable uptick in folks kind of lamenting the Switch as this aging bit of tech. The Switch is now like increasingly portrayed as the one that kind of can't keep up with contemporary demands, particularly when it comes to third-party offerings. I mean, admittedly there is some truth to this. The Switch is powered by an NVIDIA Tegra X1 chipset, a system on a chip that was initially revealed way back in 2015, when Obama was still in the White House.
Kablamo! Jesus, Joe.
So yeah, it's been a while. Of course, Nintendo themselves are masters at getting the most out of the hardware. Thanks to a thoughtful balance of scale, scope, and thoughtful art design, they're still putting out ambitious titles years into the platform's life. However, the same argument can't always be made when it kind of comes to like third-party releases. Just a few years ago, like most big multi-platform games would get a Switch version, but now it's increasingly common to see Nintendo's platform just left out. We've had a slew of ambitious third-party titles such as like Star Wars Outlaws, Payday 3 and Cities Skylines 2, opting to skip the Switch and come to the more powerful latest Xbox and PlayStation machines. This technical concern about the Tegra chip, along with this like console starting to miss out on certain software, I guess kind of starts to create a sense of yearning for whatever may come next, I mean, typically a console lifespan is around 6 to 8 years, so when a machine does start to hit those later milestones, folks naturally look forward to whatever the future may have in store. There has been plenty of rumour about a Switch follow-up. I mean, you only have to go back a little while to see all of the stories about the Switch Pro, A quick sidebar about this fabled Nintendo Switch Pro. Nintendo are never going to call anything of theirs Pro. They're a toy company, let's leave the Pro moniker to like the Apples of this world. Anyway, yeah, putting old rumours to one side, there are a few kind of subtle things we can pay attention to when it comes to thinking about what's next. One such example that we can look to is that the long-standing CEO of Ubisoft, Yves Guillemot, recently told GamesIndustry.biz, there's a link in the description below, that the company released their second Mario plus Rabbids game, Sparks of Hope, too early, resulting in fewer sales than anticipated. Guillemot said that having spoken to Nintendo, kind of regarding the release timing, that his takeaway was that it's better to do one iteration on each machine, adding that they were a bit too early and should have waited for the next console. This comment, mainly his words on the next console, has been interpreted as suggesting that the next machine from Nintendo is coming sooner rather than later, and that he's had kind of conversations with Nintendo about the matter. A quick little thing about Sparks of Hope and its kind of sales performance. I'd say a big part of its kind of lackluster sales performance is probably due to the first game being constantly on sale on the Nintendo eShop, you know? The first game, which is great by the way, was always heavily discounted, to the point where I'd say that probably a good number of people probably just came to the conclusion that the follow-up game, Sparks of Hope, would see deep discounts too, and decided to just kind of wait things out for such a moment to arrive. Beyond Ubisoft, Nintendo commented back in early 2022 that how the runaway success of the Switch had kind of altered what the company previously considered to be a conventional hardware lifecycle, and that as a result of that, the Switch would have a lifecycle longer than the norm. More recently though, Nintendo president Shuntaro Furukawa noted how maintaining the sales momentum of the Switch will be difficult in its 7th year. But he kind of also shared how the company has no plans for new hardware in this fiscal year, which runs until the end of March 2024. So this desire that Nintendo expressed to kind of have the Switch have a longer life cycle than normal is now kind of pushing up against the reality of the hardware being a bit old and the software story with third parties kind of changing, you know? Nintendo really do kind of find themselves between a rock and a hard place with the Switch. I mean, it's a nice problem to have, but, you know, this is an aging platform that's still a mega hit, so the timing on just when they decide to actually pull the plug and move over to fresher, more capable hardware is a real tricky one. Personally, my bets are on Nintendo shooting for a late 2024 kind of holiday season release, or even an early 2025 launch window. You know, the latest Nintendo Direct showed us that the system still has plenty to come, including 2024 games. I mean, it makes good sense, right, for whatever does come next to be backwards compatible. Nintendo would be fools to leave this audience and ecosystem that they've built up of 120 million strong players and leaving them behind. It's how they transition those folks to whatever comes next is kind of what's key here, you know? Oh, and whilst we're talking about dates and kind of upcoming games, I could see Metroid Prime 4 ending up as a cross-gen release in kind of a similar way to how Breath of the Wild was handled on the Wii U to Switch. Yeah, Metroid doesn't have the same kind of pull as a Mario or a Zelda game, but I'm not really expecting this game to kind of carry the launch solo here. But, you know, when you know that Retro Studios are still hiring for this game, then I don't think we should be expecting it anytime soon. And it kind of makes sense to kind of bump it to the launch of whatever comes next, right? It bolsters the launch lineup for whatever the Switch 2 may be. So, what happens between now and whenever Nintendo's next console does actually arrive? Well, unlike in older generations, the Nintendo Switch still has a really healthy release calendar for the most part, you know? With plenty of games hitting the eShop week in, week out. Trust me, I know, because I look at every single one of them for my weekly Nintendo newsletter. There's a link in the description below. Like I mentioned earlier, Nintendo seems to be doing a really good job at the minute of keeping the plate spinning. The latest Direct presentation had plenty to like, including remakes of much-loved classics such as Super Mario RPG, silly kind of family fun via a new WarioWare. I didn't love Get It Together, so I hope this one's better. And the return of 2D Mario with the superb-looking Super Mario Wonder. A big name, surefire hit that's looking to be a much welcome addition to the Switch's library in its twilight years. And we'll no doubt bank on the success of that recent movie as well, right? It's clear that despite the challenging juggling act that Nintendo have in front of them in terms of making the transition to whatever is next, the company still has a great appetite for making plenty of great, fresh software experiences on the Switch. This Twilight era is all just one of timing, really. As Ollie Welsh writing for Polygon notes, the company are in something of a tricky spot, but ultimately the company can afford to ride out a quiet year or two, take its time, and pick its moment. But it's getting that moment right, that's the hard part. For the most part, putting aside the kind of Joy-Con drift blemish, the past 6 or so years of the Switch era has been a very good time to be a Nintendo gamer. Of course, any person who's been a Nintendo fan long enough will tell you that this company doesn't always get the transition right to whatever comes next, you know? You only have to look at the mammoth success of the Wii and the kind of tepid follow-up reception that the Wii U enjoyed to see that Nintendo doesn't always turn up with something that's wholly bankable. But for the most part, with the Switch, this one feels like it's an easy enough thing to make a success of. Just more of the same, please. I mean, sure, asking for an evolution instead of a revolution may be kind of like sacrilegious for a company that's dead set on kind of like novel innovation. But I'd like to frame the Switch successor as being a potential NES to SNES style success story all over again. Of course, the beauty of taking a much more iterative and backwards compatible approach is that the company can continue to support the Switch whilst the follow-up machine is out. And this kind of keeps the millions of people who don't want to jump in straight away on launch happy, you know? Now, whether they take such an atypical and conservative approach remains to be seen, but however Nintendo decide to go about things, I mean, I'm just looking forward to being along for the ride. In the meantime, I'm just going to enjoy the Switch sunset because, you know, it's looking wonderful. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, I really, really appreciate it. If you've liked this video and you want to see more just like it, then be sure to subscribe to Overkill.